My grandma acted like she was dumb. Why? To put an end to my greedy family once and for all. My name is Miranda. I'm 18 years old and I'm currently homeless. I know that you must be thinking, where are this girl's parents? Did she get kicked out? What's going on with her home life? Well, to recap, it all started when I was 17 years old. I was an only child and my parents have given me all the love in the world. We lived with my frail and elderly grandma, who was getting on in her years. She was still sharp, as she would always been, but tended to get sick a lot. My parents were immensely successful with their respective careers, and their careful saving, along with the fact that they only had 2 dependents, made them extremely financially unstable. They've planned everything for my future. I was an excellent student with straight A's and was hoping to get into my dream university soon. They had set up a college fund for me and had saved up all the money I would need for my dorm room and other needs. In short, life was perfect. Until one day, I came home from school to find my grandmother alone in the house. My parents had told me that they might go out for a while, and I knew that they loved taking the bus to an old park across the city, where they had fond memories of their younger days. However, it was getting a bit late, and they were usually home by now since they knew I would be coming home at this time. I called both their cell phones but could not get through. 3 p.m. came and went, then 4 p.m. Finally, at 5, after I had made sure that Grandma was comfortable and had everything she needed, I told her I was leaving to check the local bus stop and to call me if they came home. On the way to the bus stop, I phoned the police, reporting that both my parents were missing and that I could not get through to them. They told me that they checked with local law enforcement. I made my way to the bus station, intending to ask security footage guy to show me that day's footage, to make sure they had indeed taken the bus. Before I could get there, however, my phone rang. It was the police calling me back. They said there's been a terrible bus accident in the city, and they had recently identified my parents' dead bodies after pulling them out of the wreckage. I couldn't believe my ears. I was sure that they were wrong, that they had misidentified the bodies, and I asked them the address to the hospital where the victims have been taken. Then I took a cab. When I got there, I was horrified to find that the police had been speaking the truth. My parents' bodies laid in the morgue, their eyes open, white clothes placed on top. I broke down, crying and yelling. A nurse soon came to comfort me, asking me if there was anyone that she could call. I remembered my poor grandma, who would be devastated at losing her child at such an age. I thanked the nurse and raced home and broke the news to Grandma, comforting her and assuring her that everything would be fine. Since I was still a minor, I had to take Grandma to the hospital to get them to release the body. I also informed my parents' lawyer about the unprecedented circumstances. He said that after the funeral he would disclose the contents of the will. There were very few family members at the funeral, and both my parents had come from small families. There were a few distant relatives, but the ones I recognized was my aunt, my mother's sister, and her family. I'd always been close with their daughter, Emma, and after the funeral she hugged me, telling me that Aunt had talked to Grandma and they were going to be staying at our house till the entire matter got settled. That evening, the lawyer came by, announcing something shocking. He said that my parents had explicitly stated in their will that if they were to die early, my aunt would be the executor of the will. I would receive all the property and shared assets, but only after I turned 21. This did not include my college fund, but did include the house that we lived in. Until then, she could decide what to do with it. For all intents and purpose, the house temporarily belonged to her. I was too stunned to notice at this time, but my aunt could barely contain her glee. She looked ecstatic to be living in such a lovely house, and remarked that the house was at a prime location and it would be great at market value. The lawyer bid us goodbye and left. Immediately, my aunt sprang up and said that she was taking over all household duties from now on. She busted into the kitchen, taking my uncle with her and shutting the door. I took my grandma upstairs and wondered about what would become of me now. I didn't want my aunt and her family living here at all. Unfortunately, there did not seem to be anything that I could do about it. At dinner that night, my aunt had changed into a completely different person. She said that from now on this was her house and that I was to leave immediately and find alternate arrangements for living. Shocked, I protested, telling her that I've lived in this house my entire life and this was just a temporary arrangement. She said she didn't care. She was going to live it up while she still could, and that right now I was a stranger, not them. She did not want me living there anymore, and that if I did not get out of my own accord, she would get the police to come and evict me. This was the second shock I got in such a small time. I just lost my parents, and now my scheming aunt wanted to kick me out, and the only home I ever knew. I wanted to shout at her and scream about the unfairness of it all, and how everything was being taken from me, one after the other. However, from her expression, I knew she would be good on this threat. Without a word, I ran to my room. And filled up all the suitcases I had. I intended to leave first thing in the morning, but I had to do something first. That night, I stole my parents' old room and took everything of value. I took my dad's watch collection. I took all my mom's jewelry, along with other personal items and pictures I could find. She could have taken everything else, but she was not going to take my memories. The next day, I left. Before I made it past the front gate, Emma ran up to me and told me she was so sorry about her mom. Her mom's doing this and she would try to talk her out of it. She gave me some money and said that she would get me more when she got it. I went to a friend's house and explained the situation to her. She invited me to stay, but said that I did not want to be a burden to anyone, and I just needed to take care of all my valuables while I figured out what to do. I went to a local shelter and thought about what I could possibly do. I was supposed to leave for college soon, but I had survived on my own till graduation. I thought about my poor grandma stuck in that house without me. I stayed at the shelter for a while. It was rough going, and I was afraid of getting mugged. But things weren't as bad as I had thought they would be. A couple days later, when I was talking to my grandma, she said she might have a plan for getting me back the house, but it would take a while. I told her not to worry about me and take care of herself. I did not want her getting sick due to stress or anxiety. She also told me that as soon as I had left, my aunt started some minor renovations in the house with her own money. She was planning on constructing a pool in our garden and revamping the patio. She was also getting the house repainted. My grandma warned me that my aunt was up to no good and to be careful. A few days later, I got a call from Emma, who was giddy with happiness. She said that the family had talked to my aunt and made her see reason that she was doing a terrible thing to her only sister's child. She had reflected upon her actions and was sorry for what she's done. She has invited me back home with open arms and was willing to let me regain control of the house. She was going to completely sign the house to me. She'd drawn up all the papers and was going to be waiting for me next weekend at the house. I was over the moon with joy. I cried with happiness, thankful that she has seen the error of her ways. Things were finally starting to look up for me. I spent the rest of the week in a daze daydreaming about living in my own home again. Finally, it was Friday. I was getting ready to go over to my friend's house and retrieve my stuff to take back to the house, when I got a call. It was my grandma, and she was whispering, as if careful not to be overheard. She told me that my aunt and her family had constructed a trap for me, and were using Emma to help accomplish it. This is how it was. My aunt, after having planned the renovations in her own money, had decided that she would somehow trick me into completely signing the house over to them, so that I would not get it back after I turned 21. They had intended to renovate the house and up its market price. They were going to sell the property at a very high price and get rich. For that, they needed my signature. So they devised a fake plan that Emma would call me and say that her mother was sorry and wanted me back. They would invite me over and tell me that I could have the house back, then give me papers to sign that would make it possible. However, the papers would say something completely else and give my aunt sole control of the property. Forever. Then they would kick me out of their lives forever and start their new lives after screwing me over. I was devastated, to say the least. But more than that, I was furious. I wanted revenge. I swore to myself that I would get this house back no matter what. My grandma further said that she had a plan. She was going to tell the family that she had some old property and that she wanted to give it to my aunt since she was old now and wasn't going to do anything with it anyways. She would get her all excited about the prospect of father riches and tell her that she needed to sign papers that would think we were transferring over property from Grandma to herself. But in reality, they would be papers dissolving her parents' decision to withhold the house from her till she was 21 and immediately release the transfer of all ownership rights to me. However, for this plan to work, Grandma needed to lay some groundwork first so she could get a lawyer to draw up this necessary paperwork. This would also require me to not show up at my house tomorrow. Energized by our new plan, I finished talking to Grandma and phoned Emma right away. I told her that I was very sorry, but I had to leave over the weekend to visit some potential colleges that I was thinking of applying to. I had a couple of colleges in different states in my itinerary, and it would take about a week or so. After hearing this, she sounded very disappointed and asked me whether I could visit them before leaving. I knew what she was trying to do, so I told her sorry, but it's very urgent, and that all of my friends were going together right now. I didn't leave in a few hours. I would have to go all alone. She finally agreed that they would move up the date to next week. I spent the rest of the week hiding out, to make sure that my cousins or my aunt did not accidentally see me around town. I got weekly updates from Grandma about how her plan was going. After a couple of days, she said she had the papers ready and was going to ask my aunt to sign them the next day after she came home. The next day, I waited anxiously for Grandma's call. Around dinner time, she called me and told me that the plan had been a huge success. My aunt had greedily signed the papers without reading anything or consulting a lawyer, because my grandma had exaggerated and went on about the market value and size of the property she was transferring. I was incredibly relieved because no matter what happened next, I had my house back. I had Grandma send over pictures of the document to ensure I still had proof in case they got, quote, lost. That weekend, as planned, I went to my house. My aunt met me at the door, all tearful and apologetic. She cried and told me how sorry she was about what she's done. She took me inside and said we could sign the papers after lunch. She had a great dinner prepared. I enjoyed every second of it, envisioning their faces when the truth would be revealed. Afterward, with the papers in front of me, I thanked my aunt with a smile, picked up the pen. But before signing, however, I told her that I should read the papers just in case. Flustered, she said there was nothing to read and would I understand anyway since I was so young and had no knowledge about law. I still insisted on reading it beforehand, so I picked up the papers. Angrily, she ripped them from my grasp, telling me to sign the papers as is. Calmly, I asked her why. She was speechless. I then told her I knew all about her plan because Grandma had warned me. Additionally, I told her that the paper she signed without reading had transferred the house back to me. Next, I told her to go to hell and get out of my house like she's done to me before. I told her that I would call the police if she did not comply. Grandma chose that moment to walk in with a pile of papers, showing them to Aunt. My aunt read through them and angrily ripped them apart, saying that no, we had nothing, and laughing. Grandma told her all those documents were a copy and the real ones have been already submitted in court. So now the house was officially mine. This time, I did not even let her stay a night. I kicked him out straight away and also told my aunt that all the money she invested in painting the house and paying the construction company to build the pool had gone down the drain. She was much poorer than when she arrived. She yelled and screamed at me that this was her house and she would get it back, so I called the cops and had her forcefully evicted from my property. My aunt and her family finally left, and I decided that as long as I lived, I would never see or speak to them again. From then onward, the only family I would have was my sweet, sweet grandma. What a horrible situation OP had to go through during that time. Can you imagine someone like this aunt, how vile and toxic they are, to snoop in at that exact moment when OP was at her lowest? Guys, let me know exactly what you think of this story. I think sweet justice occurred in the end when Grandma tricked the aunt with the same plan she had. Drop your thoughts down below, subscribe to the channel, and the next story on the day. Am I the a-hole for making my mother-in-law believe I was having an affair? This one's juicy, guys. Let's get right to it. I'm a 27-year-old female, and my husband, 26 male, are big gaming addicts. Our parents hate that we played games, and we got into multiple fights as children and adults over our hobby. It's a sore subject in our family, and we've adopted to lie and say we're outside if anyone asks what we're doing. We both work from home, and right after work, we proceed to play games until midnight. None of us like leaving the house, so we're practically next to each other 95% of the time. There's no humanly possible way for either of us to cheat on another. I'm currently pregnant, and this has caused our in-laws to visit frequently. Due to this increase in visits, we've had reduced much of our gaming time for better health of the baby, and so they do not see us gaming. We've gotten into an argument about how our hobbies are, quote, unacceptable and childish, and that we need to change. Sundays are known to everyone as the, quote, unavailable day, and we always say we're on a date or something, but in reality, we're at home getting our weekly gaming quota covered. My husband went to a gaming cafe with friends, and I stayed home last Sunday. Mother-in-law later decided to call me in the middle of a match, and I suppose I was acting very suspicious because I wanted to end the conversation ASAP. She asked what I was doing, and I replied automatically without thinking. I was on a date with my husband. According to my husband, she then later called him, and he said that he was at the bar with friends. Mother-in-law decided to visit my house, where I was undoubtedly in the middle of another game. I avoided any phone calls and pretended not to hear knocking until my match was over 20 minutes or so. Afterward, I answered the door and pretended that I was sleeping, which is why I wasn't answering the phone or the door. Mother-in-law exploded at me, calling me a cheater, and that the child I was pregnant with was not her son's. Because otherwise, why would I not answer the door? The idea that I would cheat, and that it would even be possible to cheat on my partner, was so hilarious to me that I burst out laughing, which angered mother-in-law even more. She continued to berate me while I just smiled, sitting there thinking how ridiculous all this was. When my husband came home, she berated me in front of him, and how I was cheating on him. My husband was visibly confused the whole time and confirmed with his mother that there was no possible way for me to cheat on him. He explained how we're together practically every moment and every second of the day. And when mother-in-law saw he was not getting on her side, proceeded to get mad at me for leading her on. She called me an a-hole for pretending to have an affair and never correcting her before she told other people. Although I never clarified I wasn't cheating, I do think that it was not her place to come unannounced and proclaim that I'm a cheater. So let me know in the comment section down below. Am I an a-hole? Well, this story is pretty easy to judge in my opinion. I say not the a-hole like 99% of people on the original thread. Actually, the number one thing of advice was to stop letting her in her house at all. I kind of agree with that because this mother-in-law was not only toxic, she was a Karen. Okay guys, that's all the stories I have for you today. Show a little bit of love for the channel and drop a comment down below for the algorithm and let me know, how is your day going today? I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.